Welcome to Unbound, the podcast with Beth Curry, author, storyteller, and survivor. This is where books meet real life, where Beth reads chapters from her work and breaks free from the traditional audiobook format, diving deeper into the personal experiences, lessons, and liberation behind every page. Nothing is off limits. Let's get unbound.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Unbound, Season 3, The Other Side of Quiet. This chapter shifts from story into meaning making. It's where I kind of step out of the moment and talk directly to you, the way that I wish someone had talked to me when all of this was still kind of raw and shapeless. If you hear pieces of yourself in what I'm about to read, you're not imagining it. You know, trauma echoes across lives, and understanding those echoes is the beginning of kind of shifting how they affect you. And at the end, I'm also going to explain something I've been struggling with for 5 years that nobody has understood, but maybe now that the most crucial parts of my story have been told, it will make more sense. Okay, so this is Chapter 9, What I Know Now. It does come with a content warning. There's discussion of trauma responses, manipulation, medical dismissal, pregnancy loss, and the long-term psychological impact of abuse. So please take care of yourself while listening. So Chapter 9 in the book, What I Know Now. Let's pause here for a minute. I know that was a lot. I know reading about what happened to me might have brought up your own shit, your own memories, your own questions about things you've experienced or witnessed. If you're feeling triggered right now, if you're seeing yourself in parts of my story, if you're wondering whether what happened to you counts as abuse, take a breath. You're safe now. You're here reading this, which means you survived whatever brought you to this book. I want to talk to you directly for a few pages, not as the girl who lived through all that trauma, but as someone who spent decades studying human behavior, working in psychology and forensics, sitting in therapy rooms as both patient and professional observer. I want to share what I know now that I wish I'd known then. Because the thing is, trauma isn't just something that happens to you. It's something that changes how your brain works, how your body responds to the world, how you understand yourself and relationships. And if no one ever explains that to you, you'll spend years thinking you're crazy instead of recognizing that you're having normal responses to abnormal experiences. Let's start with predators, because understanding them is crucial to understanding why none of this was your fault. Brandon wasn't an angry teenager who lost control. He wasn't someone who made mistakes in the heat of passion or got carried away by his emotions. He was a predator. Predators are different from other criminals. They don't just hurt people by accident or in moments of poor judgment. They systematically target vulnerable individuals and use sophisticated psychological techniques to gain control over them. Here's how they operate. They scout for vulnerability. Brandon didn't randomly choose me. He identified me as someone who was already isolated, already silenced, already trained to believe that my needs didn't matter. Kids who have been bullied, who don't have strong support systems, and who seem hungry for attention and validation, those are the ones predators can spot from across the room. They create a false sense of relationship. This is called grooming, and it's not just for child sexual abuse. Brandon made me believe we had something special, something mutual, something I was choosing. The walks, the conversations, the way he made me feel seen and valued, that wasn't real. That was a carefully constructed psychological manipulation designed to make me complicit in my own victimization. They isolate their targets. They don't just physically separate you from support systems. They make you believe that other people wouldn't understand, that what you have together is too special for other people to get, that involving others would ruin what you have. Before I knew it, I was keeping secrets, making excuses, and gradually cutting myself off from the people who might have helped me. They use intermittent reinforcement. This is one of the most powerful psychological tools that predators use. They alternate between kindness and cruelty, affection and threats, making you grateful for basic human decency and desperate to earn back their approval. It creates a trauma bond that's incredibly difficult to break. They escalate gradually. Brandon didn't start with violence and rape. He started with attention and flattery. Each boundary violation was just a little bit worse than the last, so I kept adjusting my baseline of what was normal until I was accepting things I never would have tolerated at the beginning. They make you feel responsible. This is crucial. Predators are experts at making their victims feel like they chose what happened to them. They convince you that you led them on, that you wanted it, that you could have stopped it if you'd really wanted to. This isn't true, but it's incredibly effective at keeping victims silent and compliant. If you've experienced this kind of systematic manipulation, please understand this wasn't about you being weak or naive or stupid. This was about a predator using sophisticated psychological techniques that work on most people under the right circumstances. You were targeted because you were human, not because you were flawed. Ask yourself, have you ever felt grateful for basic kindness from someone who mostly treated you poorly? Have you ever made excuses for someone's behavior because they had moments of being sweet? Have you ever felt like you led someone on, even when you never explicitly consented to anything? These are signs of predatory manipulation, not evidence of your complicity. Now let's talk about trauma and how it affects your brain and body. When something overwhelming happens to you, especially repeated overwhelming things, your nervous system gets stuck in survival mode. Your brain literally changes its structure to help you survive, but those changes come with side effects that can last for years. Memory becomes fragmented. People always ask trauma survivors why they can remember some details perfectly but not others, why their story might change over time, why they seem confused about the timeline. This isn't lying or attention-seeking. This is how traumatic memory works. Your brain prioritizes survival over accurate record-keeping, so you might remember the color of someone's shirt, but not what day it was, or remember exactly what they said, but not where you were when they said it. Your threat detection system gets hyperactive. After trauma, your brain becomes convinced that danger is everywhere. You might startle at unexpected sounds, feel panic in situations that remind you even slightly of your trauma, or have a constant sense that something bad is about to happen. This isn't paranoia. This is your brain trying to keep you safe the only way it knows how. You lose trust in your own perceptions. When someone systematically convinces you that your version of reality is wrong, when they gaslight you into believing that up is down and black is white, your brain starts to doubt its own ability to interpret information accurately. This is why trauma survivors often feel crazy or unsure about their own memories and experiences. Your nervous system gets dysregulated. You might swing between feeling numb and disconnected from everything and feeling overwhelmed by emotions that seem too big for the situation that triggered them. You might have trouble sleeping, trouble concentrating, trouble regulating your emotions. These aren't character flaws, they are symptoms of a nervous system that's been pushed beyond its capacity to cope. You develop hypervigilance. You're constantly scanning your environment for threats, constantly assessing whether the people around you are safe, constantly trying to anticipate and prevent the next bad thing from happening. This is exhausting, but it feels necessary for survival. You might dissociate. Sometimes when things get too overwhelming, your brain just leaves. You might feel like you're watching yourself from outside your body, like things are happening to someone else, like you're not quite present in your own life. This is your brain's way of protecting you from experiences that are too much to bear. All of this is normal. All of this makes sense. All of this is your brain and body trying to protect you with the tools they have available. You are not broken. You're adapted to survive in dangerous circumstances. The problem is that these adaptations can make it hard to function when you're finally safe. If you recognize these symptoms in yourself, please know you're not going crazy. You're having normal responses to abnormal experiences. Your brain is doing exactly what it's supposed to do when faced with overwhelming circumstances. The goal isn't to shame yourself for these responses, but to understand them so you can start to heal them. Now let's talk about shame versus guilt, because this distinction can change your life. Guilt says, I did something bad. Shame says, I am bad. Guilt is about actions. Shame is about identity. Guilt can be productive if it's accurate. It motivates you to make amends, to change your behavior, to do better next time. Shame is never productive. It convinces you that you're fundamentally flawed, unworthy of love, irredeemably damaged. Most trauma survivors carry massive amounts of shame. We believe that what happened to us is evidence of our worthlessness, that we somehow deserved it, that we're toxic to other people. This shame usually isn't even about the trauma itself. It's about how we responded to it. We feel ashamed that we didn't fight back harder, that we didn't tell someone sooner, or that we let it continue for so long. We feel ashamed of our symptoms, the nightmares, the flashbacks, the inability to trust people, the way we sabotage good relationships. We feel ashamed that we're not over it yet, that we can't just move on, that we're still affected by something that happened years ago. Here's what I need you to understand. None of that shame belongs to you. You survived. However you survived, whether that was fighting back or freezing, whether that was telling someone immediately or keeping it secret for years, whether that was leaving right away or staying longer than you think you should have, you survived. And survival is never something to be ashamed of. The shame belongs to the people who hurt you, not to you for being hurt. The shame belongs to the people who failed to protect you, not to you for needing protection. The shame belongs to the systems that silenced you, not to you for having something to say. Your trauma symptoms aren't evidence that you're broken. They're evidence that you survived something that could have destroyed you. Your difficulty trusting people isn't evidence that you're paranoid. It's evidence that you learned to protect yourself when the people who should have protected you didn't. Your struggles with relationships aren't evidence that you're unlovable. They're evidence that you're trying to learn how to love and be loved after someone taught you that love was dangerous. You are not what happened to you. You are how you survived it. Ask yourself, what shame are you carrying that doesn't belong to you? What are you taking responsibility for that was never your fault? What would it feel like to set down that shame and leave it where it belongs, with the people who hurt you? Let's talk about why trauma survivors often push away the people who love them. This is one of the cruelest side effects of trauma. It makes you believe that you're dangerous to the people you care about. After someone has systematically convinced you that you're worthless, that you're the problem, that everything bad that happens is your fault, your brain starts to believe that your very existence is toxic to other people. You start to think, if I love them, something bad will happen to them. If I let them get close to me, they'll see how damaged I am and leave anyway. It's better to push them away now before they have a chance to hurt me or before I have a chance to hurt them. This is called trauma bonding when it applies to staying with abusive people because chaos feels familiar, and attachment avoidance when it applies to pushing away healthy people because safety feels foreign and scary. Your brain has been trained to associate love with danger, care with control, intimacy with vulnerability to attack. So when someone shows you genuine love, unconditional, patient, kind love, your trauma brain goes into overdrive. This is too good to be true. They don't know the real me yet. I'll just disappoint them anyway. They deserve better than someone as fucked up as me. I need to leave before they leave me. And so you sabotage it. You pick fights, you create drama, you disappear, you cheat, you find ways to prove to yourself and to them that you were right all along, that you don't deserve love. This isn't because you don't want love. This is because love feels terrifying when your nervous system has been programmed to expect love to come with violence, manipulation, and abandonment. The people who love you might not understand this. They might take your pushing away personally, might think it means you don't care about them. They might eventually give up trying to love someone who seems determined to reject them. And that breaks your heart because you do love them. You love them so much that you're willing to sacrifice your own happiness to protect them from what you believe is the toxicity of your presence in their life. This is trauma logic, not real logic. You are not toxic. You are not dangerous to love. You do not contaminate good things just by existing near them. You are someone who learned to associate love with danger, and now you need to slowly, carefully, patiently learn that love can be safe. This takes time. It takes therapy. It takes people who are willing to love you while you learn to believe you're worthy of being loved. But it's possible. I promise you it's possible. Ask yourself, what good things have you sabotaged because you didn't believe you deserved them? What relationships have you ended because you were afraid they'd end anyway? What would it feel like to believe that you're worthy of unconditional love? Let's talk about the medical system and how it often fails trauma survivors. When I showed up at the hospital bleeding, telling obvious lies about what had happened, no one asked the hard questions. Maybe they didn't want to know the answers. Maybe they weren't trained to recognize the signs. Maybe they were too busy or too overwhelmed to look beyond the immediate medical emergency. But the result was that I received medical care for my body while my trauma went completely unaddressed. This happens to trauma survivors all the time, especially women, especially young women, especially women of color and women from marginalized communities. We show up with injuries that don't match our explanations, with symptoms that don't make medical sense, with patterns of harm that clearly indicate abuse, and we're treated for the immediate problem while the underlying cause is ignored. Healthcare providers often aren't trained to recognize trauma or ask about it in ways that feel safe for survivors to answer. They might ask, "Has anyone hurt you?" While your abuser is sitting right there. Or, "Are you in a safe relationship?" when you don't even know what safety means anymore. They might dismiss your pain as anxiety or attention seeking or drug seeking when it's actually untreated trauma showing up in your body. They might treat your symptoms without addressing the root cause, leaving you feeling crazy and unheard, like there's something fundamentally wrong with you that even doctors can't fix. If you're a trauma survivor navigating the medical system, here's what you need to know. You have the right to be believed. If a healthcare provider dismisses your concerns, minimizes your pain, or makes you feel like you're overreacting, find a different provider if you can. You deserve to be taken seriously. You have the right to trauma-informed care. This means care that recognizes how trauma affects your health, that asks about trauma in sensitive ways, and that doesn't re-traumatize you in the process of trying to help you. You have the right to ask for what you need. If you need a female provider, ask for one. If you need someone to explain what they're doing before they touch you, ask for that. If you need to have someone with you during their appointment, bring them. You have the right to say no to procedures that feel invasive, to questions that feel unsafe to answer, to treatment that doesn't feel right for you. You survived by learning when to say no to protect yourself. Don't abandon that skill just because someone has a medical degree. Your body holds the truth of what happened to you. Even when your mind can't remember clearly, even when other people doubt your story, your body remembers. Trust what your body is telling you. Ask yourself, have you ever felt dismissed or disbelieved by healthcare providers? Have you ever had physical symptoms that doctors couldn't explain? Have you ever felt like your trauma wasn't taken seriously as a factor in your health? You deserve better. Keep looking until you find providers who see your whole story, not just your symptoms. Let's talk about grief, especially the complicated grief that comes with losing a baby to violence. Grief for a baby is different from other kinds of grief in ways that people who haven't experienced it often don't understand. You're not just grieving the person they were, you're grieving the person they would have become. Every birthday that passes, every milestone they'll never reach, every moment you'll never share with them. You're grieving not just their death, but the death of your dreams for them, the death of your identity as their parent, and the death of a future you'd imagined. When that loss comes from violence, when someone deliberately took your baby from you, there's an additional layer of trauma that complicates the grief in ways that feel unbearable. You're not just sad, you're angry, furious, filled with a rage that has nowhere to go, because the person who caused this is either unreachable or protected by systems that don't believe you. You're not just mourning, you're reliving. Every memory of the violence, every detail of what happened plays on repeat in your mind until you can't tell the difference between remembering and experiencing it all over again. You're not just grieving your baby, you're grieving your own innocence, your belief that the world is fundamentally safe, your trust that people won't deliberately hurt the most vulnerable among us. And society doesn't know how to hold space for that kind of complicated grief. People want to comfort you with platitudes. Everything happens for a reason. God needed another angel. At least you know you can get pregnant. People want you to move on and heal and find closure, as if there's a timeline for recovering from having your child murdered. People want to focus on the pregnancy loss and ignore the violence that caused it, as if treating the symptom while ignoring the cause will somehow make you whole again. But you can't heal from complicated grief by pretending it's simple grief. You can't recover from traumatic loss by pretending it was natural loss. You can't move forward by pretending you weren't the victim of a deliberate, calculated attack designed to destroy not just your baby, but your hope for the future. Your grief is allowed to be complicated. Your anger is allowed to exist alongside your sadness. Your rage at the injustice is allowed to coexist with your love for your baby. You don't have to forgive to heal. You don't have to let go to move forward. You don't have to find meaning in senseless violence to make peace with what happened. You just have to survive it, one day at a time, one breath at a time, one moment at a time. And you have to find people who understand that some losses are too big to ever fully recover from. You just learn to carry them differently. Ask yourself, what kind of grief are you carrying? What have people told you about how you should be feeling or healing? What would it feel like to honor your grief exactly as it is without trying to make it more palatable for other people? Finally, let's talk about healing, what it actually looks like versus what people think it should look like. Healing from trauma isn't linear. It's not a straight line from broken to fixed, from damaged to whole, from victim to survivor. It's messier than that. It's more like a spiral. Sometimes you're moving forward, sometimes you're moving backward, sometimes you're moving sideways in ways that don't seem to make sense to anyone, including yourself. There will be days when you feel strong and capable and proud of how far you've come. And there will be days when something small triggers you and you feel like you're right back where you started. Both of those experiences are part of healing. Healing doesn't mean you'll never think about what happened to you. It means you'll think about it differently. Healing doesn't mean you'll never have trauma symptoms. It means you'll understand what they are and have tools to manage them. Healing doesn't mean you'll trust everyone. It means you'll learn to trust your instincts about who is and isn't safe. Healing doesn't mean you'll never feel angry about what happened. It means you'll find productive ways to channel that anger. Healing doesn't mean you'll forgive everyone who hurt you. It means you'll stop carrying their actions as evidence of your worthlessness. Healing means learning to distinguish between the past and the present, between what happened then and what's happening now. Healing means developing a relationship with yourself that's based on compassion instead of criticism, acceptance instead of shame. Healing means finding people who can love you, not in spite of your trauma, but including your trauma as part of the whole, complex, beautiful person you are. Most importantly, healing means understanding that what happened to you was never your fault, but healing from it is your responsibility, not because you owe it to anyone else, but because you deserve to live a life that's bigger than what was done to you. You deserve to be more than just someone who survived terrible things. You deserve to be someone who thrived in spite of them. Ask yourself, what does healing mean to you? Not what other people have told you it should mean, but what would it actually feel like to be healed? What would you be able to do, feel, or believe about yourself that you can't do, feel, or believe now? If you see yourself in my story, if any of this resonates with your own experiences, please know you are not alone, you are not crazy, you are not broken beyond repair. You are not responsible for what happened to you. You are worthy of love, safety, and healing. And if you're not ready to believe those things, that's okay too. Hold on to this book, come back to these words when you need them. Let them be a bridge between where you are now and where you want to be. Your story isn't over yet. The trauma was just one chapter, not the whole book. You get to write the rest. Okay, so I couldn't talk about this last episode because I didn't think it was the time or the place, and I was kind of emotional, and I had a lot to say at the end anyway. So I figured I would share this now that my full story of what happened to me is out there, now that you know my story, the biggest details about my story. I want to talk about something that's been incredibly difficult for me over the last 5 years that a lot of people haven't really understood. The masks. I know some of you have wondered. I know some of you judged. And I couldn't explain it then because explaining it meant telling you everything else first. I couldn't. I wasn't ready. After I was physically assaulted in a parking lot, I did post a video on Facebook in late fall of 2020 sharing vague but pretty direct facts about what happened. I did say that I was raped and I was suffocated and why I couldn't wear a mask. And I've shared it in past episodes as well, you know, what that resulted in. And I also know that people who do this, to this day, you know, they still have the same question. You know, they never even bothered to watch that video. When I'm spoon feeding you information that will answer your questions, don't turn your head. If you're going to ask the questions, you have to be prepared for the answers. Okay, so here I am again. Now you know about Brandon. Now you know about what he did to me. Now you know about being suffocated on New Year's Eve. So now I can tell you about the masks and why this has nothing to do with politics or science or public health debates and everything to do with post-traumatic stress disorder. I want to be very clear about something up front. This is not a political statement. This is not about policy debates or public health measures or anything other than trauma. I'm not here to argue about mandates or effectiveness or any of that. These conversations exist elsewhere, and I'm not interested in having them. This is purely about what happens when someone with severe PTSD from suffocation is asked to put fabric over their face. This is about rape. This is about violence. This is about a physical trauma response that I had zero control over it. That's it. That's what this is. So in June of 2020, I had my first full post-traumatic stress response to wearing a mask in public. I was in a store, I was masked, I was trying to comply with the requirements, and suddenly I couldn't breathe. Not because the mask was restricting my airflow. I understand how masks work. I understand most of the science. But because that sensation, cloth over my face, feeling my own breath, something pressed against my nose and mouth that I couldn't immediately remove, it triggered an immediate trauma response. My body didn't care about logic. My nervous system didn't care that I was safe. It just knew something's covering my face and I can't fucking breathe. And instantly, I was back there. Back to that night. Back to the hand over my face, my mouth, my nose. Back to Brandon holding it down. Back to the absolute terror of suffocation. This wasn't a choice. This wasn't me being difficult. This was PTSD. And I was standing in a public place with my 14-year-old son next to me, trying desperately to keep my shit together while my body was convinced I was dying. And this was the first time, actually, since 2006. That's an upcoming chapter that you're going to hear about when it happened to me then as well. Anyway, for 2 years after this incident in the store, I couldn't go anywhere that required masks. Not wouldn't. Couldn't. I tried multiple times. I tried different types of masks, face shields, breathing exercises, grounding techniques. I tried talking myself through it, reminding myself I was safe using every coping skill I had learned in therapy. It didn't work. My trauma response was stronger than my rational mind. Every time fabric touched my face, my nervous system went into full panic mode. Heart racing, can't breathe, tunnel vision, the works, a full PTSD response. This is what trauma does. It overrides logic. It overrides intention. It overrides your desire to comply or be helpful or do the right thing. Your body just goes into survival mode and you can't think your way out of it. There was one place that showed me compassion every 2 weeks when I had to go. They understood that I had a legitimate medical reason because PTSD is a medical condition, and they worked with me. But even their compassion came with conditions. I couldn't come in when other patients were there. I had to be brought to a back room immediately. I had to be kept separate. And I understood why. I really did. They were trying to protect their other customers and staff. They were trying to balance my needs with everyone else's safety. But it was still humiliating. I felt like a zoo animal, to be treated like I was contaminated or dangerous when I was never sick. When I was just a trauma survivor, trying to exist in public without being re-traumatized. I was grateful. Don't get me wrong. I was grateful for their willingness to accommodate me at all. Very. But it also reinforced how impossible my situation was. And then there was my mom. When she moved into a long-term care facility, they required masks for all visitors. The mandates were dropped. There were no public health directives, but they decided on that for their own establishment, which again, I understand the reasoning. I'm not arguing against their policies, but it meant I couldn't be there for her. I couldn't be there on moving day. I couldn't visit her in her room. I couldn't sit with her when she was adjusting to a scary new place. She had to be brought outside to see me in the dead of winter, where I could be with her, my mom, without triggering my PTSD. And people, family, friends, facility staff, they'd ask me, why can't you just put it on for your mother? Can't you just deal with it for an hour? As if I was choosing this. As if I just didn't care enough. As if my love for my mother should somehow override a trauma response that I had no control over. They didn't know about Brandon. They didn't know about the suffocation. So from their perspective, I just looked like someone who was being difficult or selfish. That's actually not entirely true. Some of them knew what happened to me, but they had forgot or decided that it wasn't a problem, or decided that I was lying, and then just completely invalidated my experience by continuing to ask me why I wouldn't just do it. Anyway, I couldn't explain it without explaining everything else, and I wasn't ready to do that yet. And at the time, I didn't like making people uncomfortable. One time, I looked someone square in the eyes and I said I was raped. And my God, that person shut right the fuck up and turned around, and that was it. If you're going to make me uncomfortable, I'm going to make you uncomfortable. So for 2 years, I was isolated, not by choice, by trauma. And I felt imprisoned once again by Brandon. Long after I had forgiven him for what he did to me. When he raped me, I put myself in a prison where I isolated for years, and then I was forced to do it again because of a pandemic. I couldn't access most public spaces. I couldn't visit my mother properly. I couldn't do things that other people could do. And I couldn't explain why without disclosing deeply personal trauma that I had kept private for nearly 30 years. So I just looked like the problem, like someone who was being unreasonable or making things harder than they needed to be. But for what? It took me back to my childhood, to people treating my legitimate struggles as bad behavior, to being seen as difficult. In this case, I was actually in pain. The message felt the same. You're making this too complicated. Just do what everyone else is doing. Stop being such a problem. But I wasn't being a problem. I was having a trauma response. There's a difference. I want to be really clear. I'm not using my trauma to make a political statement. I'm not trying to argue against public health measures. That's a whole other conversation. I'm not trying to create division or controversy. I'm just trying to help people understand that sometimes what looks like defiance or difficulty is actually someone trying desperately not to fall the fuck apart. Okay? Sorry, I'm a little angry about it. That PTSD is real. The trauma responses are not choices. That you can't always see why someone is struggling just by looking at them. I wish I could have explained this earlier. I wish I had the courage or the words or the readiness to tell people what I was dealing with, but I didn't. So once again, I just struggled in silence and I looked like I was being difficult. Now that my story is out there, now that you know what happened to me, I wanted you to understand this piece too. Not to make excuses, not to argue about policies, just to explain that my inability to wear a mask had nothing to do with politics or science denial or selfishness. It had everything to do with rape and suffocation and PTSD. That's it. That's the whole story. If you're someone who judged me during that time, I don't blame you. You didn't have the context. You didn't know what I was dealing with. And for those of you who did have the context, after the fall of that 2020 there, when I shared that video, you could have done better. You should have done better. And now that you have the full story, if you even bothered to listen, you have another chance to do better. Not just for me, but for everybody. And if you're someone listening to this who has their own trauma responses that other people don't understand, once again, I see you. I know what it's like to look like you're being difficult when you're actually just trying to survive. Trauma is invisible. PTSD doesn't show up on the outside. People can't see what's happening inside your nervous system. But it's real, and it's valid, and it deserves to be understood. Thank you for being here. Please make sure to follow me wherever you listen to me so when new episodes come out, you'll be notified. Remember, all episodes of Unbound are free, but if you want to support the production costs, you can find me on Ko-fi. All the support and contact info is in the show notes. You can also join the Facebook group if you would like to continue the conversation. I will see you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to Unbound with Beth Curry. Join the conversation in the Facebook group or visit author.bethcurry.com. Want to support the show? Head to ko-fi.com/unbound podcast. Until next time, stay unbound.